Hello, everyone. Welcome into the fourth edition of the Straight Fire Podcast. It is a joy to have you here. We pray that you've been listening to all the episodes, but if this is your first one, we'd like to welcome you in as well. As we start, I just want to go ahead and say, a lot of podcast apps have a lot of different ways for you to support the podcast. If you feel it in your heart, we'd love for you to do that. The 5-star rating, the review, all of those things, so we can help boost this podcast and so we can bring it to more people. So, boys, for today's topic, it's going to be this. We're bringing reality to an unrealistic world. And this kind of fantasy that the world has, this idea that is not true, is that as long as you're happy, I'm happy. Noah, as long as you're going to church and you're living your Christian life and you're okay with that, we're good. And as long as I'm doing whatever I want to, as long as I'm, maybe I go to church every Easter, maybe I go to church every Christmas. As long as I'm doing that, I'm good. And as long as we both live our lives to the fullest, I guess for those of you who are not watching, I'm quotation marks with the fullest, then we'll be okay. And just, that reality has kind of swept our nation, and it's a live and let live mindset. That is not true. The verse I have for this, just to kick us off, is Romans 1:21 through 23. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of an immortal God for images made to look like a mortal human being, and birds, and animals, and reptiles. And so the key phrase I want us to focus in on as we do this is, although they claim to be wise. Because we live in a world that thinks this reality, this fantasy, I guess, is wise. They think that's wisdom. But we know the truth, and we know, again, the reality of what is going to happen. Would y'all add anything to that?
I think for Romans 1, and I know I just cut Landon off, I'm so sorry. I think for I think for Romans 1, I think that's such a good starting point. Because I remember talking about that in class, and we have this chapter, right? And it starts off talking about the power of God. It starts off talking about how Paul's done all this for the Romans. But the chapter ends very dark, right? I mean, there are some wicked things going on here. Even things that we see today in our own world. And the two reasons those things happen, the turning point, is what you just read. For they knew God, they did not honor him as God, nor gave thanks to him. If we truly honor God, if we truly want to give thanks to him, then we're not just going to say whatever we want is okay, but we're going to be looking to do the right thing for him, right? And that's why all these bad things come about, is because they knew him, but they did not give him honor, or they did not thank him for what he'd done to save them from their sins. They simply continued in their own life as whatever sins they wanted to do.
Right.
I think Noah pretty much summed that up pretty well. I mean, that's, as long as I'm happy and you're happy, we're good. As long as I get what I want, and and you get what you want, and we don't get in each other's way, and you don't mess with what I want, and I'm not going to mess with what you want, we're going to be okay. And how dangerous that is as a Christian, because it's not about what I want. It's
right.
about what God wants, and as a Christian, I should be striving to follow what God wants in our lives. And so I think that's why this is such a good topic, is to see why this is dangerous, not just wrong, but why it's dangerous, and we're gonna get into that soon.
Right. I think looking at Romans 1:21 again, like what you were talking about, like the danger of this. Like the reality was, for though they knew God, the reality was God was real, and the reality was that God was to be not only it's not only knowing God, but it was to glorify God and give thanks to Him. They did not do that. So they knew in their mind what to do. They knew in their mind what the reality was, but they didn't do it. And what Landon said, it's dangerous, especially today, because the more we live around that mindset, the more we're going to find ourselves seeing that way. Like, well, as long as he's not trying to dissuade me from my faith, I'll be fine. And as long as he's not actively working against me, the church will be okay. But we're not called to just live in the world. We're called to make disciples of the world. And so I think that's what that mindset affects.
Yeah, I mean, think about this world. That's such a good way to describe the world we live in now, especially our generation, is they know God. They know of God, right? You look at most polls nowadays, we've all seen them, and wherever you look, most people believe in God, right? That's pretty commonly accepted. But that's about it, right? I mean, you look around this world, you can't see that many people truly honoring God and truly trying to do everything he says. But people like to just say, yep, he exists and God wants me to be happy, and that's about all I need to know.
Yeah.
But there's so much more. Like, that is taught against in the Bible so much, especially by Jesus himself. Jesus taught against this doctrine of, well, whatever makes you happy. No, he, again and again and again, he told people exactly what would not make them happy. Right? I mean, if you think about how different Jesus' ministry would have been if God's only goal, God's only revelation to man was, I want you to be happy. His whole ministry would have been completely different.
Right. Yeah, and God could have said, like, just go do whatever you want, but that's not the reality of the situation that we're in. And so let's bring it home. Not bring it home. Whoa, we got a lot more podcasts left to go.
We got a lot more
podcasts left to go. Let's bring it to the first question that we have.
Well, that's it, guys.
Right, great podcast, everybody. But let's bring it to the first question that we have. So question 1, where does this fake reality come from, and why has the world accepted this? I keep calling it a fantasy. Why has the world accepted this idea?
I think, for starters, we want to be happy, naturally. I mean, and human instinct is that whatever that is, I'm going to do it so that I am happy, because I don't want to be in a state of not being happy, and so that's going to mean that I will do things that I usually wouldn't if you have no boundaries. I'm speaking for the regular person that has no set boundaries. I'm going to do what I want to be happy. And that may look like that I just accept whatever you accept, so you stay away from me so that I can do what I want to do. See, if you don't mess with me, or rather, if I don't mess with you, I think you're not going to mess with me. Yeah. And so I'm going to accept whatever you do so that you will accept whatever I do. And so the world has just built up this idea, well, this is okay, because what we want people to be happy. Most people, at least, want everyone to be happy. And so who are we to judge what makes you happy? And so I'm just going to accept whatever you do because, well, that makes you happy, so
right.
It's okay.
I think Satan has tricked so many people into only wanting short-term happiness, right? Because
right.
We as Christians, we're not trying to take away from people's happiness, right?
No, we're trying to add to it exponentially.
Infinitely. Eternally, you might say.
Yeah.
But all people want is they want to be happy right now, right? We live in a society that we need instant gratification. I want this, and I want this right now. I ordered a package about 3 days ago. It will not get here till next week. And do you know, I am dying over here because I want my package. But that's the world we live in. We live in a world of instant gratification. So having to wait and having to not do the things you want to do this whole life, well, of course that seems horrible to them. But we have to convince them of this reality that ultimately what makes you feel good, happy in the moment, will lead to so much misery. And if you can put that off, if you can get past the lies that Satan keeps telling this world and get to heaven, then that's ultimately what matters in the end. And that's what will make you eternally happy, and much more than just happy.
Yeah. In James, I think you're right. This has come from the devil, and because and it goes back to what Landon's saying as well. When people believe in the idea of as long as you're good, I'm good, it isolates us, because like Landon said, people use that to try and push others away. Like, hey, you do your thing, I'll do mine, so you don't come bother me. And so James 1:14 says, but each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. When we as Christians live in the reality with other Christians who believe the same thing, it's harder to draw us away. We just went to camp and talked about being rooted and grounded. And like, I think our teacher made the point of like, when all the trees are together and all the roots are interconnected, it's so much harder to blow those trees over. But when we're drawn away by the things that we want, and we're drawn away by the fantasy that this world presents, that's when the devil has us. That's when we're enticed and we fall to sin. And so I think this reality puts people in their own bubble, and we like it because we can live off a whim and doing whatever we want to do. And again, as Landon said, never have to face the consequences of what we're doing, because no one's going to check on us. Because this world believes, hey, maybe what he's doing isn't for me, but that's for him. That's his decision to make. And so we follow. Yeah, it's my truth, and that's where my truth comes from. It comes from that idea of you can do what you want to do, and I can do what I want to do. But reality is, truth is there, and truth is truth is knowable and it is not unchanging. And so we as Christians have to accept that. And I have a next question, unless y'all have anything you want to add? No? Okay, all right. So the next question is, why not live like this? Why not live like live and let live? The truth is whatever you want it to be. Is this not living peaceable with all men? And before you jump on this, I have 2 verses I brought in support of this argument, actually. Because as you probably know if you've been listening, we are debaters, and we do enjoy, I at least enjoy, arguing for both sides.
Playing devil's advocate.
You're playing devil's advocate.
That's what he was born to do.
Yeah, I think so. That's what I've been told anyway. So in 1 Thessalonians 4:11, Paul says that you also aspire to lead a quiet life and to mind your business and to work with your hands as we commended you, that you may walk properly toward those who are outside, that you may lack nothing. Now, next verse. 1 Peter 4:15, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or as a busybody in other people's matters. Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this matter. So, boys, I've just presented 2 verses that clearly state that we should just mind our own business and not worry about the things other people are doing. Okay, we don't need to be busybodies in other people's affairs. And so I've kind of just thrown this to y'all off rip. But
Absolutely.
do you have any response?
I would like a disclaimer to know that he did not tell us that he would be adding a negative argument, and just before.
Well, I wanted it to be natural. I wanted
it.
it to be natural.
We're going completely off
It's
script,
not
so
fair.
y'all buckle up. For
It's
this.
not fair if y'all are ready to smash my negative argument before you get here.
Have a whack at it, Noah.
I think so. What comes to my mind is he's talking about living this peaceable life with all people. Well, we talked about this at the beginning, but we always have to go to the perfect example, and that is Jesus. So you're telling me if I took your logic to the extent that it should go, if you push that logic to its extreme, that means Jesus should have done all he could to live peaceably with men, right? So he shouldn't have rebuked the Pharisees and Sadducees. You know what he should have told the rich young ruler? He should have told the rich young ruler, do whatever you want. Follow your heart. Keep all your riches. Because he was wanted to live peaceably with all people. Should he have made the Romans upset? Well, no, he shouldn't have. Should he have... Again, there were so many people that Jesus upset. But living peaceably with all men, as much as it is up to you, but I live peaceably to God first. My life is given to God before it's given to man. Christians are called not to be troublemakers. They're not called to be, we're not supposed to be rebels in the streets, always causing uprising. But we can only go so far. It reminds me of the government talk we have. Well, the Bible tells us to submit to the government, so if the government tells us to not go to church, are we going to do that? Well, of course not, because we answer to God first. And Jesus answered to God first. So we need to live peaceably with men as much as it is up to us before it comes into conflict with God.
Yeah, Glenn Colley would be proud of you, Glenn Colley, for those of you know, is our debate teacher, and he would be very proud of that answer. Landon, do you want to continue to pile on to my negative argument?
Go ahead. I'll add on to that.
Please. I want to destroy this argument.
Noah definitely went where I would have went first. Talking about, we go to the perfect example, Jesus, and, live peaceably with all men. Well, then we look at Jesus' life, and he made some people mad.
Right.
He didn't come to bring peace, but a sword.
But when you look at in Romans 12, 18, if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men, and you put that in context. You go back to verse 17, it says, repay no one evil for evil, have regard for good things in the sight of all men. What this is talking about is when you do something wrong to me, I don't come back at something. I'm going to live peaceably, and when you do something that you shouldn't do, I'm not going to be like, okay, well, here you go. You started this, and I'm going to finish it. Instead, I go, you started this, but I'm going to be like Christ, and I'm going to let it go.
I mean, even go back even further in the context.
Yeah, that's
just go to Romans.
So let's just read Romans 12.
Go to the beginning of Romans 12. By the mercies of God, present your bodies a living sacrifice.
Yeah.
You don't present your body a living sacrifice to men. You present your body a living sacrifice to God. Do not be conformed to the world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, not the will of man, what is good and acceptable and perfect.
I'm thoroughly convinced y'all read my notes on this, because you know what I brought up? So first off, in leading a peaceable life, here Peter and Paul are referring to our own conduct. Don't be makers of trouble, but that doesn't mean trouble won't find you. This message cannot this message cannot be live your own life and bring the message of the gospel to only those who need to hear it. Jesus said, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Obviously, Jesus would never stir up trouble, but in proclaiming truth, trouble found him. So I got leaked, and that's how y'all were able to answer my argument. But it was a really good job, and I'm glad that y'all were able to so confidently rebut that, because it is ridiculous, the idea of, well, the Bible's telling me that I just have to accept whatever people throw on me, and I can't. And like Landon said, like, we're not supposed to seek out revenge on people, but like we are supposed to tell people there will be consequences for your actions. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm just warning you of what's going to happen. I'm doing that out of a place of love, right? And so as that idea of like, no, we can't live like this. We can't live with the idea of you can do your thing and I can do mine, because that's unrealistic. Jesus knew what was true, and Jesus knew that the reality was he was here to save people whether they liked it or not. And so that's the reality that we have to live out. We're here to save people whether they're willing to be saved or not. I mean, obviously they have to accept our salvation, but we're ready to proclaim that salvation whether they want us to or not. Yeah. Anything to say as we move on?
Yeah, I want to jump back in real quick, and we talked about going back, or Noah did, Jesus' example of living peaceably with all men. But when he did confront someone on something where the people bring up, well, he wasn't living peaceably, why did he do it? He didn't do it because, oh, well, I don't want you to be happy, or I don't like how you're doing that. He came out of love, trying to show them a better way. Again, they wanted instant happiness or instant gratification. Jesus was trying to show them eternal happiness. And so Jesus didn't come in and just upset people because he could or he felt like it. He was doing it out of love. And I think that's kind of hard to see how that could be out of love. But as you go to the scriptures and as you study the life of Christ, you really do see it was out of love, even though to most people it wouldn't seem like it. And so today, when we present these things like this podcast, on sometimes you and me being happy isn't the right thing. We're not saying this because we don't want you to be happy, or we just think our way is better. We're trying to show people true happiness.
Right.
Yeah. And again, that's a hard reality for some of us to accept, because I want to be happy right now. But, I think Jesus is always the perfect example, and we find ourselves going back to him so much. I want to build off what Landon said. He didn't tell people what they didn't want to hear just to make them upset, right? He had a reason. One of my favorite examples, and I've gone to it multiple times. I'll probably go to it every time I speak, but it's in Mark 10 in the rich young ruler. And Mark's account specifically adds, Jesus, looking at him, loved him, and said, go sell all your possessions and come follow me. Jesus looked at him, loved him, and told him exactly what he didn't want to hear. Not because he knew that would make the rich young ruler sad, but because he knew that would ultimately make the rich young ruler so much more happy in eternity, right? And that's, again, Jesus is such a perfect example of what we're trying to discuss here.
Yeah, and Noah, again, I feel like you've read my notes, because the next question 3, is reality is hard to accept, especially for our generation. So what is the strategy in bringing it to them? And my whole strategy revolved around the rich young ruler. Jesus said, if you want to be perfect, go sell whatever you have and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. And the young man heard that saying, and he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. And so, I think what I keyed in on there was the rich young ruler. Our generation is a young generation, and we tend to focus on the things, on what we've already touched on, the instant gratification. So how do we bring this, especially very hard reality, to a generation that doesn't like dealing with hard things? To a generation that says, you do what you want to do, I'll do what I want to do.
I think we have to start with showing them that their happiness now will ultimately lead to ruin, right? And that's, again, what you just said, that's a hard reality. And I don't mean just absolutely beat them over the head with this reality where you are going is going to take you to a place you don't want to end up, right? That's not how it's done. Or you don't just show them, yep, your actions are going to get you exactly what you deserve. No. But we need to show them in love that, hey, this is going to end up badly for you. There's so many examples. This kind of happiness does not last. And we have to show them. And again, I don't think we give our generation enough credit. Sure, there are some better than others, but they do have those questions. They do wonder, where will I be at the end? We have to give them those answers so that they can put their faith in something that will last. And we've talked about this before on other podcasts, but they have to be on the right foundation, because anything else, well, it's sand. right? It won't last. So when those hard times come, when something hard comes, well, they're not going to make it because all their happiness, all what they want is focused on right now. We have to show them, we have to help them look past right now. There is something better if you'll just wait.
Yeah, no, I think that's why it is so hard for our generation, because we're being raised in a society. When I get a pack, I have Amazon Prime. Okay, I get packages the next day, but even with that, I don't want the package tomorrow. I wanted it yesterday, and so we're being raised in a society where if I don't get it today, then I get upset, and so but then we bring this reality of salvation and true happiness, and you have to tell them, look, you're not gonna see it in this lifetime. And they're like, what?
Well, yeah. Wait, hold on.
Wait,
I'm not
going
to get anything in this life? What?
You mean Jesus promised me nothing here? Well, what's the point?
Yeah.
And then that's what Noah was building off of. It is hard. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it is super easy to be a Christian. There are hard parts to that, but there are such amazing parts too where that, yeah, true, I'm going to live probably between 60 to 80 years and what the world would call not true happiness. You're not going to have everything you want to when you want it, but I'm going to spend an eternity in true happiness. And when you weigh that, knowing that, there is no scale that will match that. But showing that to them, because, giving our generation its due respect, that we are being raised like that. It's not that we just woke up, well, I want everything today. Well, that's how we were raised.
Yeah.
And so trying to show them polar opposite.
Yeah.
It is hard.
We live in an instant gratification world.
Definitely.
And, when it wasn't hard for me to make that decision of, I want to be baptized and go to heaven, even if it means I don't get everything I want in this life. Because I was raised believing that, Benjamin, like, what happens in this life isn't the ultimate decider.
Right.
I mean, obviously what happens in this life will determine what happens. So I guess it is the decider. But what happens in this life isn't the end. What happens in this life isn't the most important thing. But not everyone was raised like that. Again, people were raised thinking that as long as I can get what I want, and I can get what I want it as fast as possible, that then I'll be okay. And so, like, again, we're bringing this hard reality, and like Landon said, oh no, my mind is blank. No, I think you had something.
I was gonna
take it away from me, please. Please.
And you were doing a really good job. I was just gonna say that, me and Landon have just talked about what we started with about this, bringing this hard reality to this generation. Right, it's not gonna be easy, but there are benefits to being a Christian right now. And I believe we see those benefits all the time. I truly believe that Christians live the best life on this earth that's possible. I think it's not always going to be easy, right? It was never promised to be easy, but I do believe it is the best life. Think about all we have, right? We have faith in something that's greater than ourselves, who God can help us, even though we're not with Him right now, He can still help us on this earth. We could talk to the Creator of the universe whenever we want to. We know we have a piece of where we're going, and our whole life doesn't revolve around instant gratification things that get shorter and shorter and shorter, but instead our life revolves around something that will last, right? And that makes it touches every aspect of your life and makes it so much better. And that's one of the benefits that can be instant, right? If we are willing to work at it. But there's so many benefits right now also to living a Christian life right now, and I think we need to tell our generation about those as well.
Yeah.
Right, I know we actually talked about that a little bit in our mental health podcast.
Yeah.
The thing that helps Christians get through stuff like anxiety and depression is the fact that I can take that to God and have a peace knowing that's in His hands now.
Absolutely.
That's something that people in the world don't have, but that's a peace, and that is I lost the word, but that is something good that we as Christians have that the world doesn't. And so Noah's right that it's not that as a Christian on this life there is nothing to look forward to until eternity. Like there is so much to look forward to. It's just not the kind of stuff the world is pushing for.
Yeah.
Also, one of the benefits I feel like that we never talk about, like when you become a Christian, think about that you get access not only to God through Him in prayer, but you get access to the church family. And that's a powerful resource. I've seen that resource affect a lot of people in a lot of positive ways. One of the things my dad said, and he says this when we help people move and stuff like that. He's like, I don't know how people function without a church family, because it's just like an extra security blanket that you get to throw on top of everything. I was thinking about a reality like when Landon was talking about like the benefits that we have, like the peace that we have with God. Like, I was thinking, like, imagine like you're out there you're living on your own, and like bills are piling up. You haven't been, let's say you got hurt, you haven't been able to work, stuff like that, and like it's not on anybody else. It's on you. It's on you to make those. It's on you to make up the money. It's on you to make sure your life's still going okay. But if that happened to me, it would be me and God and my church family. I have all these tools around me, and so when we bring this reality of like, a lot of times people claim we're bringing this reality of gloom and doom, but we're bringing this reality of like, one, eternal salvation, obviously the highest reward, but two, people who genuinely care about you and want you to be there in eternal salvation with them.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big blessing that we need to talk about more. Whereas what we started talking about, I want to say eternality. Eternity is something that obviously is the most important thing, and that's what we stress the most, that this life won't be easy, but those things are things that need to be talked about as well.
All right, before we continue on this real quick, I just want to throw this question in there because we've already kind of moved on to it, but might as well. So what makes this reality so hard to accept, but why is it worth it? And we've already, again,
I'd say we kind of covered
we covered it pretty well, but what do you think the first part, looking at the first part, and then we can look at the last part as we kind of wrap this up. But what makes this reality so hard to accept? Why do people find themselves living in a fantasy world outside of this reality?
I mean, we talked about it. Instant gratification. People want to be happy right now. They don't want to be told what to do. They want to have, if Landon's hit on it, well, if I don't tell anyone what to do, then they won't tell me what to do, and we can all live in ways that make us happy. He lives in a way that makes him happy. I live in a way that makes me happy. That's all that matters, because that's what this world wants, is ultimately to be happy and to not have to think about the consequences of any of their actions. That's what makes it so hard.
We also don't like confrontation.
Yeah.
That the normal person does not
I do not like
confrontation.
Yeah.
And so whatever it takes to get away from that, then I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so that it's just kind of, you stack all of these things.
You talk about not liking confrontation. Like, I'm the kind of guy like, oh, you messed up my order, I guess I'm eating this order. Like, oh well. And like I think that proves like our generation.
Every time you go to McDonald's.
We like it is so hard, and that's a little thing that just kind of leads to a bigger thing. Like, it is so hard to talk to people about this reality. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, there's a reality where like if you don't get your act together, you could go to hell forever. And like that's like how do you bring that to people? And that's one of the things that makes this reality hard to accept. But what makes it worth it is, again, what we've talked about, heaven, and it's the Christian family, and it's having friends like you guys that I can like rely on and I can talk to, and so we can realize that we're all in this together. Like, hey, we all know what the end goal is, and we're all walking the Christian walk together. This will be a lonely road to walk by ourselves, but the reality is God gave us the church so we can walk it with other people. And so let's wrap up everything we said. Let's kind of recap everything we said as we start to close out. So Noah, begin a recap for us, sir.
Well, we started.
Do you want me to remind you of the
Give me
questions?
Just give me the first one.
The first question was, where does this fake reality come from?
So yeah, we've talked about it. It comes from, and we honestly just hit on it again. It comes from people. It comes from people wanting everyone to be happy, which is a natural human. I mean, that's natural for most people. Yeah, I want everyone to be happy. Like when I'm in a group of people, I want them all to be happy, right? But sometimes, and we talked about Jesus right off the bat. That is what Jesus, he didn't come to make everyone happy, right? And that's what's important. And the reality comes from our natural human emotions, but it's been twisted, right? And we have to sometimes stand up to that emotion and be like, hey, I want everyone to be happy, but I want everyone to be happy in heaven more than I want everyone to be happy right now.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing we talked about was why. The next thing we talked about was the argument that y'all destroyed.
Do you want to destroy it again?
I would like y'all to recap the destruction, basically. Give me the highlights. Why, like, in a football game, like if one team got beat 56-0, I don't want to watch the whole game. Just like show me all the touchdowns and we'll move on. But like, why not live like this? Why not live peaceable with all men? And Landon, you and Noah destroy this, but recap that for me real quick.
Well, it kind of goes back to, as we always do, and we always will. We go back to Jesus.
Always.
And we look at Jesus' life, and as much as he could, he lived peaceably with all men, but that did not mean he was going to sidestep the real issues. And again, like I said earlier, it wasn't because he felt like it or he could. It was because they wanted instant happiness, or they wanted happiness that would only last so long, and he was trying to show them a better way. He was trying to show them eternal happiness, and that's kind of the main thing, is just, well, living peaceably with all men, in the sense that you were bringing it up in that negative argument, is just illogical. It just it gets you nowhere, because yeah, she may be happy right now, but I can promise you one thing: that happiness will leave.
Yeah.
Eventually.
So next thing was, this reality was hard to accept, especially for our generation. We talked about instant gratification.
Yeah.
Talked about instant gratification, and we also talked about the rich young ruler, and talking about how the world doesn't like confrontation. The world doesn't like being told no and stuff like that. And Noah, you had a good thought on that. Can you run that back one more time, or?
Man, remember what I said? That's always so hard. Just talking about Jesus. I mean, Jesus told him exactly what he. I mean, again, what Landon said. Jesus is our perfect example. This world, they don't want to hear that confrontation, right? They don't. But Jesus knew it would be best for him, so that's why he told him to get rid of his riches. And that's a hard thing to accept in the moment, right? I mean, obviously, if Jesus told us, go sell all that you have and follow me, that's not just an easy thing to go, bang, done. What can I do next? Right? That's a lifetime of commitment.
Yeah.
And that is that lifetime commitment that is kind of scary, right? A lot of commitments are scary nowadays. And then this commitment is the biggest, not one of, the biggest commitment you'll ever make. And that's what we're being asked, and that's why it's so hard to bring it to this world.
Yeah, that was good. I put you on the spot there, but that was really good. That was and then finally we're talking about, why is this reality hard to accept, but why is it worth it? And for that one, I'll take this one here. We talked about heaven, and we talked about that heaven will make everything worth it. But we also talked about the earthly blessings that we get, because a lot of times people think there are no earthly blessings, but that's not true. We talked about the peace we have in God, and like Landon said, we covered that a lot during the mental health podcast. The peace that God brings us through just knowing who He is. And we also talked about the church family, and I think that's such an underrated aspect of our faith. And when talking about why this reality is hard to accept, is just people don't like living in reality. People want to live in a fantasy world where they get what they want when they want it, and no one bothers them when they do something wrong. That's not the reality we're living. That's not the reality that we're called to bring. So, closing thoughts, Noah, Landon, anything you want to say as we close, any message you want to send out as people, finish this podcast and go back to their daily lives?
Just, again, take this idea that as long as you're living happy, as long as you're doing what makes you happy and what I'm doing what makes me happy, take it to its logical conclusion. Well, what does that mean? Why do we even have the Bible, right? The Bible is to instruct us on how to live, but if, again, the only thing God wanted to show us, if the only thing God wanted to tell us was be happy, then there's no point in having this Bible, right? It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for the apostles, for the writers of the epistles to instruct us on how to be better. There's no reason for Jesus to come down and confront people, right? If God's only message was to be happy. But that's not what it is. He calls us to be better so one day we can be with Him in heaven and have eternal joy in His presence. And that's what we're working for, not on this earth. We are working on this earth to have that eternal joy, but this place is not the end goal. This earth is not the end goal.
Landon, anything as we close?
I think he summed it up pretty well, but I would say this for anyone listening. Here's a question, and it's just something to think about. How long do you want to be happy? You want it now, or you want it later? Yeah. That's literally what this comes down to.
I like that.
How long you want to be happy?
That is a good thought, and that will be the fourth. We're now wrapping up, the fourth edition of the Straight Fire Podcast. We hope y'all enjoyed watching. Again, as I started off, if there's whatever you can do to support this podcast, we encourage you to. It helps out a lot, and it lets us know that what we're doing is going pretty good. It has been a joy and pleasure to film. Noah, Landon, thank y'all for being here. We look forward to seeing y'all in the next one. We hope y'all have a safe day, and again, we just hope that you'll focus on this reality and this message that God has told us to bring to the world. All right, and that's it. Thank y'all for